It's been a week now since I brought home this humble little van from the state surplus auction here in Delaware. That drive home showed me exactly why the bidding maxed out at $275. The power steering didn't want to work, the transmission didn't like to shift, the exhaust was hanging off, the speedometer, odometer didn't work either. But that drive home also showed me that this little van's got some pretty cool redeeming qualities too. And that's when I made the decision to see if I can get some of this sorted out for as little money as possible. Let me show you what I've been doing over the past week with this thing. One of the first things I noticed with this van while it was sitting at the auction lot was just how clean and straight the body was. No significant issues, no significant rust problems, which is unique for where I live anyway. Has good tires. The slider did not like to open, and so I ended up cleaning out the channel, getting all the gunk out of there, both the top, the bottom, and on the sides, spraying some white lithium grease in there. I scrubbed the interior. The seats came out really nice and clean. No rips, no tears. Very nice condition. Did the same thing with the front as well. Both the driver's and the passenger side seat came out nearly new. The carpeting got scrubbed. I pulled out the floor mats to scrub them down. Pulled out the carpet cleaner, sprayed and scrubbed everything I could get to. Got much of the coffee stains out. And it's not perfect, but it's certainly much better than what it was. Back carpeting, I took off all the trim. Took out the back carpeting as well and scrubbed that by hand. The headliner was ripped and torn. I don't know what in the world was going on with it. Took a knife, cut around the edges, ripped it all out. Underneath where the exhaust was hanging off, I took a Sawzall, cut out 14 inches of pipe, pieced in a new piece with some clamps, and buttoned that up. Some of the comments from the earlier video about this van said that I should check the fuse panel for the speedometer and the odometer. So I jumped under there, took a look, pulled the cover off, and what I found was fuse number 8 didn't even have a fuse inserted in it. For some reason it was pulled out. I pulled a spare fuse off the cover, put it in. As soon as I plugged it into the port, the door chimes came on, the radio lit up, the odometer lit up as well, and the speedometer started working once I took a drive. Inside, the steering wheel was a disgusting mess. And so I ran out and picked up this cheap steering wheel cover, put it on there, but obviously it doesn't cover the entire steering wheel, so I wrapped the wheel in duct tape first, put the cover back on, and at least it keeps my hands clean now. Under the hood is a 3-liter Vulcan engine making 140 horsepower. At the auction lot, the battery was dead. However, it charged and has been holding a charge since then. The transmission fluid wasn't even reading on the dipstick, so I added 2 quarts there, and I added some transmission fluid also to the power steering reservoir. The engine oil was fine. It looked clean, and it was registering just fine on the dipstick. Also, on the grill, that was weathered and worn, much like the bumper is right now. I had some gray in the basement. I sprayed it on there after taping it off. And I realize now it doesn't match very well, so I may end up taping off the bumper and spraying it the same gray. All told, everything I put into this so far, just under $23. And so, why don't we go for a drive? I'll show you what it's like now behind the wheel of this mighty little Aerostar. Now, one of the first things I realized since putting the exhaust back together on this thing is just how smooth and quiet it is. It really is. It changes my entire attitude about this car. And, you know, the pipe was only $7. I already had the clamps. Took hardly any time and effort to put it together. And it changed more than just my attitude. It actually changed how this thing shifts. You see, I put 2 quarts of transmission fluid in. Made no difference in the problems that I was having with the transmission. Meaning that sometimes it wouldn't upshift. I would manually use the shifter to go from first to second. It wouldn't go into drive or overdrive. Sometimes it wouldn't downshift. But for some odd reason, and I'm not saying I know why or how, but since putting that exhaust together, the thing shifts perfectly every time, up and down, no issues whatsoever. Another thing that automatically fixed itself is the idle. Remember at the auction lot, I had a fine high idle, a cold idle, but once it warmed up some, it started pulsating and sounded like it was going to stall on me. It's fine now, absolutely perfect. The power steering just needed some fluid back in it, but otherwise, those items are cured, they're fixed. Same with the brakes. Leaving the auction lot, the brakes were pulsating and grinding. I probably had rust all over them. I thought there was some warp in the rotors, but after a week of driving, it's smooth as silk. What hasn't fixed itself, however, is the check engine light. It just showed up. And it's saying the cam position sensor. I jumped on the Rock Auto, took a look at parts, and there's a synchronizer, and it sounds like there's some setting tools that I need also to get that fixed. Total price tag $70 or so. I think the van deserves it. I don't know if I'm going to be the person that does that though. I'm having second thoughts about what to do with this van. Originally I was just going to send it to the scrap heap, but with the odometer working and showing 125,000 miles on it, with the radio working, the dome light, the transmission shifting, the exhaust being okay now, you know, I'm having second thoughts about what the next step is with this thing. Something else this van does really well, it has the 3-liter, 140 horsepower. The rear gearing, it's a 373, an axle code 24, saw that on the door. Check this out. Yeah, baby! It's like a slow motion burnout. One thing I find interesting about this van is that it's a 1997. I didn't know that at the time. But I also didn't know that 1997 is the final year for the Aerostar. Ford made a little over 2 million of these cars from 1986 through 1997. A 12-year run, one generation. They didn't have variations. And this is the end of it. Ford, I believe, made these through February of 1997. And so this is the last of the breed. Last of the rear-wheel drives. Last of it all. And it's kind of special about that. What's also unique is that this is an XLT, and in my head, when I think Ford XLT, I'm thinking all the options. I'm thinking power windows, power locks, cruise control. This doesn't have any of it, none of it. This is probably the most basic XLT I've ever seen in my life. This also doesn't have the body side cladding as well, which is what I expected from that model. So whether it really is an XLT or not, I have no idea. When I was at the auction lot with my dad when we picked up this van, if you remember, the rear wiper was like upside down and it wouldn't turn off. I was pushing the wiper button on the dash and it made no difference. What we found out is that I had to take a screwdriver and I had to pry that button up. It was jammed in there so hard. We had to pry it up and then it works fine. It comes on off just fine, which was interesting. What's also interesting is that the air conditioning works. Surprise, right? What a great surprise. And that's kind of special, kind of unique because, you know, it's a $1,000 repair bill to get that AC fixed. And most of the time nobody does it anyway because it's so expensive. But it also makes the point that when I drove home from the auction lot, I was taking an inventory of everything that was wrong with this thing. The transmission, the exhaust, the power steering, and none of it made sense to fix, right? And that was my idea. That was in my head that says, this thing is going to the scrap heap when I'm done with it after the license plate expires. But now that the transmission's fixed, now that the power steering is smooth, I just got to keep adding fluid. Now that the wiper turns off, now that all these little issues are resolved, it cannot go to the junkyard. It does not deserve to go to the junkyard. It deserves to live on. Look, this van does a lot of things well now that it didn't do previously, but it has a ton of other issues. For instance, the check engine light with the cam position sensor. The exhaust rattles. I don't know if it's the exhaust pipe, if it's in the muffler, maybe it's a heat shield. That bruise on the door, I tried to bang that out. But right behind it, after I took the door panel off, there was the door beams, and I couldn't get the dolly in there. And so all I could do was just hammer on it a little bit. I got a little bit of rust starting to creep up on the driver's side rocker panel. So it's not a beauty queen by any means, but it certainly deserves more life on the road. And that makes a point because in that last video, I got so many great comments from you guys telling me about how reliable these things are. The stories that you've shared about traveling cross country, about putting 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 miles on these things, how they just keep going and going and going. And so this van deserves a second chance, another lease on life, another opportunity to continue to get beyond that 125,000 miles, to double it, triple it even. So here's the deal with this van. I've been daily driving this thing for a week now, and I've got to tell you, I really enjoy it. It's really simple, really easy to live with, dependable, durable, reliable, does everything fine. The kids get in with dirty shoes, dirty hands, dirty feet, whatever. And it's no big deal. It really isn't. It just tolerates and absorbs it just fine. I think I'm just gonna sell it. $750, is that fair? Is that reasonable? I don't know. I'm gonna put it on my East Coast Classics Facebook page. If you know somebody that's interested, just send them over that way. Have them take a look at it. I really want somebody who can keep this thing on the road, who can tolerate the issues with it, and who can address those issues and has some pockets, you know, some money in their pocket to fix whatever issues may come up down the road. I think this thing has a lot more life to give, right? And it deserves to stay on the road, but it also deserves somebody to be able to put some money into it at the same time. So pass them along to Facebook. All right, I'm done here. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you liked the video. I hope you liked the tour of my Aerostar, and I'll see you next time.